How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be taking a look at Paranormal Activity 3. This is from 2011, directed by Joost and Ariel Schulman, and stars Lauren Bittner, Chris Smith, Csengery and Jessica Brown. And I've said this a bit before, but I really do like the original Paranormal Activity trilogy. The first 3 films were all really cool, and I think part 3 is my favorite. It's a period piece set in 1988, which instantly shakes things up a little bit. Being a prequel and getting to see the girls from the first 2 movies as young kids, there's a bit of tension behind this, knowing their fates in the other movies, but also getting to wonder what happened and hoping to see a little bit more of the lore and the origins. I really do like how the first trilogy is set up. You know, you have the first event in part 1 that's relatively unexplained. Part 2 backs it up a little bit, and from this other angle seeks to explain the story a little more. And then part 3 goes even farther back, looks from a more extreme angle, and we get to find the event with new eyes. I think it's a really clever setup. 3 distinct points of view for the original trilogy. It came out really well, but also the late 80s is such a fun atmosphere. You get to see the cool late 80s house. You know, it's this sort of nice vibe behind it. And also the VHS feel. Granted, it's probably crisper than an old-timey camera would have been, but it's a little softer. The text is a little bigger. And there's certain tech limitations, which I guess we can get into for this as well. The cameras in this movie are really cool. Basically, when you have a found footage movie, you in general get 2 types of shots. The roaming point of view camera, so someone picking up a camera and walking around with it, and then the static wide shot camera, think like a security camera. And Paranormal Act 3 does them really, really well. The walking around point of view camera, it's a very wide lens, and it's very stable as it moves around. In turn, you really do feel like you're in the set, and you really do feel like you're walking around a haunted house. Good point of view shots, but what also stands out is the static wides. In Paranormal Activity 2, we had a ton of security cameras everywhere. That makes sense. That was the future. Well, not the future for this, but in the past, in the 80s, you couldn't afford to put cameras everywhere. Cameras, tapes, much more expensive. But they said we can do 3. And in turn, limiting kind of made it a little stronger. You only got 3 locations, but you got to know them really well. And also, there was a chance that, like, say the little girl gets up in the middle of the night and she wanders around and you're like, oh no, little girl, be safe. And then she wanders off camera. What's going to happen to her out there? We don't know. We can't see it. Versus the Paranormal Activity 2 house where pretty much everything was always within view. I really like these. But this actually has probably my favorite found footage camera of all time though. The oscillating camera. Basically only having 3 cameras, you have 2 of them upstairs making sure everyone's safe. How do you document the downstairs? It's way too big. Well, you take an oscillating fan, you take off the fan, put the camera on top, and then you have a camera that will pan from room to room. And this is so great. It will pan to like the front part of the room, and something might happen there. And then it pans over to the kitchen, and that action, you're being drug away from it. Again, off-camera tension, which is very, very nice. But also sometimes you might get the reverse. Going into a room that you think is empty, to suddenly find something there. The tension that this oscillating camera brings is so great, and it was such a brilliant idea, and I absolutely love it. So yeah, with the clever ideas and uses of camera, the nostalgic feel to it, and jumping into the past, I think Paranormal Activity 3 has to be the best. I really do love all three of the originals. I did see all 6 of them in the theaters, and I remember after this one, the quality did go downhill quite sharply. 4 through 6, though, it has been a while. I'm curious how well they hold up on a rewatch, and I'll get to them soon. But for now, I can say this is definitely the high point of the series. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the plot. I'm not going to do any major spoilers, but I want to do a section where I dig down and analyze more and you know, kind of do a bit of a breakdown. Anyway, the plot. We open up with what I think of as the Paranormal Activity 2 section. We have to tie it in more directly, and we do have to get Katie involved. So we get this scene where Katie's dropping off some boxes that she inherited from her grandmother, and she says, "I don't have enough space, can I put them in your basement?" And some of these boxes are full of VHS tapes, which, yeah, that's going to be the movie. However, they do this thing where in the scene from Paranormal Activity 2 where the house gets ransacked, they add in a new scene where the guy goes, "Hey, they stole all those VHS tapes as well." And not that I want to Lucas around with the past movies, but if we re-release Paranormal Activity 2, it would probably be better for continuity to add that scene into it, but whatever. And also, I do want to say, I am not the biggest fan of these tapes getting stolen, and this may be a bit of a nerd rant, but found footage needs to actually be found. Like, the opening of Paranormal Activity 1 said that Paramount wishes to thank. It's canon within the Paranormal Activity universe that the footage gets found and then released. That makes sense for part 1 and 2, but if someone took the tapes and they disappeared, how are we watching the movie? It would make sense if someone said something like, a fan of the first 2 movies was digging around and discovered these hidden tapes. That would be okay. But it's just, I don't know how we're seeing Paranormal Activity 3. And that's my one big gripe with the movie. But anyway, we jump to the past, and we get to see the family, Katie and Christy, with their mom and stepfather. And I do like, you know, the Paranormal Activity movies, they always hinge around the parents, even if there's kids. And this is a good couple, you know, a young, newlywed couple. It's a stepfather, he's kind of a goofy guy, and the kids really love him. It's a good setup, a good, happy, young, loving couple. And I do kind of wonder, it's just a fan theory, but you know how the cult is hoping for a male child? I do kind of wonder if they were dissatisfied getting 2 girls and the cult arranged for the old husband to go away. Just a fan theory, though. Maybe you could do a Paranormal Activity tie-in book, you know, instead of found footage, a found journal, and it can be just before 3, and we get to find out what happened to the last husband. Side tangent, whatever. We get to see young Katie and Christy, and like I said, it's intriguing because each one of them had their own movie. We get to know these characters already, and knowing their fates, you know, a bit of a dread there, but also they do have a good dynamic. One clearly being older than the other, one being a little kid, and one being a kid that's probably in elementary school that can think and talk and act a little better than the other. It's an interesting dynamic, and they have a weird little room, and I don't think that gets used enough, but some houses are just kind of weird, and their room is like this weird isolated upstairs loft where it's not really closed off from the rest of the house, it's just above it. And it has a nice little door that the kids say something might be living in. And yeah, kind of Tales from the Dark Side, if you remember the episode with the Tom Savini puppet. But I really do like this loft with the little door. It's just strange enough, and that little door is so creepy. But anyway, the stepdad, is a videographer. He owns a small video company, and he's making a living shooting like weddings and stuff. And this is a good profession because back in the 80s, not everyone had a camera, and this is a guy who would have a camera, have multiple cameras, be into cameras, have the best ones, and know about them. You kind of had to do a videographer to have a movie like this in the past. But as he's filming, he notices Paranormal Activity. There's an earthquake, and the dust after this earthquake kind of falls onto the silhouette, and you briefly see the outline of a man. And I will say, with technology, that is kind of some people's things. As the Paranormal Activities moved on, they would get more and more of a budget and more of CGI, and some people would say that they made them more and more unbelievable. And I guess I get that. I think this is right on the line, where we have enough budget, where we can do some things that are kind of impressive, and some decent effects, but it's not so far that it takes away from the story. I think here is kind of where the line is, you know? But anyway, after seeing that figure, he wants to catch more. He's curious about it, and of course we're gonna get the standard pattern of being curious, to being stressed and scared, to eventually everybody fighting and saying we should just put the cameras away. What's going on here? Well, they begin to suspect that the haunting is coming from the young daughter's imaginary friend Toby, who lives in that creepy closet room. And she'll be talking to the friend, and the mom's like, you just don't know kids, you're the stepfather, kids will talk to imaginary friends. But it's pretty convincing, like she's actually talking to someone, and the young girl actresses are really good here. And I will also say, Toby was probably just her name for her imaginary friend, but that's the Paranormal Activity demon's name now, is Toby. Kind of go with Fred and Jason, the generally not threatening names belonging to super scary horror characters. But yeah, no, I remember I was watching this in the theater, and someone in the background yelled, "Toby's gonna get ya!" And that phrase just always stuck in my head, and I thought that was really cool. But we do get a nice, naturalistic little family, and I do like the sense of love and heart that this one has, and you really do get the sense that these characters care for each other, and that of course will make it more threatening later on when things start to pop off. And I won't spoil much of the end really, but I will say this movie does have a unique ending segment that explores this really interesting and creepy place, and it does lead to a pretty big ending. I remember young Zach in the theater watching it for the first time, and when we get to this segment going, whoa, that's crazy. What was even going on there? That was so much. And granted, watching this now at home on my TV, it wasn't as blowing me away as it did originally, but man, I remember seeing that ending and going, whoa, that was crazy back in the day. So overall, I think Paranormal Activity 3 is probably my favorite in the series, and you know, I really did like going into the past, the retro feel, the different technology. I like the family in this one. I think it's all really cool. And the looking at the event from three perspective things, that's really brilliant. I remember 4 definitely being a step down in quality, and I remember not liking the next trilogy near as well. But I will rewatch them, and hopefully they're better than I remember them being, but we'll see when I get there, and I hope to get there pretty soon. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my found footage movies playlist, where you can hear me talk about things like Rec and VHS, and the first 2 Paranormal Activity movies as well, and a whole bunch of other stuff. If you want to see more, you can click right here. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Relevant playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.